Black man offered his jacket to a shivering old woman outside a cafe, unaware she was the CEO. The November wind in Chicago had teeth. It bit through clothing, found every gap, and reminded the city's residents that winter wasn't just coming, it had sent its cold scouts ahead to prepare the way. Malik Johnson pulled his navy wool jacket tighter around his broad shoulders as he walked the final block to Brucourt Café. The warmth of his breath created small clouds that dissolved into the pre-dawn darkness. At 5:15 a.m., most of the city still slept, but for Malik, this was just another workday beginning, his 173rd consecutive opening shift, if anyone was counting. No one was. The cafe's back door greeted him with its familiar stubborn resistance, requiring the special push-and-lift technique he'd mastered months ago. Inside, the industrial kitchen hummed with the baseline sounds of refrigeration units, and the subtle tick of the heating system coming to life. Malik flipped on the lights, illuminating the stainless steel prep counters and the row of coffee machines waiting for his touch. Another day, another dollar, he whispered to himself, hanging his jacket on the staff hook, the one furthest from the door that no one else used. It was small, but it was his. Just like his morning ritual of arriving 30 minutes before the official start time to ensure everything was perfect before the first customer walked through the door. As he tied his green apron around his waist, his mind drifted to the conversation he'd overheard yesterday between his supervisor, Derek, and the district manager. Words like restructuring and personnel adjustments had floated through the thin office walls. The cafe had been bought out by Quantum Coffee Enterprise 3 months ago, and everyone knew what usually followed corporate acquisitions. Malik's shoulders tensed as he began the opening checklist. 28 years old with a business degree, he was still paying off and a grandmother in assisted living who depended on his steady income. He couldn't afford to lose this job. "You're early again, Johnson," came Derek's voice from the doorway, startling Malik from his thoughts. The supervisor's tone carried its usual mix of annoyance and grudging approval. "Just getting things ready, sir," Malik replied, his smile genuine despite the knot in his stomach. "Wanted to make sure the new Brazilian roast was properly staged for the morning rush." Derek glanced at his watch. "Yeah, well, just clock in at your regular time. Corporates watching labor costs like hawks these days." Translation: "We appreciate your extra work but won't pay you for it." "Got it," Malik nodded, continuing to prepare the espresso machines. By 6:30 a.m., the cafe hummed with the morning rush, business people grabbing their liquid fuel before hurrying to offices, students loading up on caffeine before classes, and neighborhood regulars who came as much for the familiar faces as for the coffee. "Large oat milk latte with an extra shot and just a kiss of vanilla," Malik called out, sliding the cup across the counter with a smile that reached his eyes. "Made it just how you like it, Ms. Rossi." The elderly Italian woman beamed at him. "This is why I come here every day, Malik. You remember everyone. Hard to forget my favorite customers." He winked, already turning to prepare the next order. And that was Malik's secret. In a world of transactions, he created relationships. Each customer left with more than just coffee. They carried away the warm feeling of being seen. It wasn't a technique he'd learned in training. It was simply who he was. The morning blur of orders and conversations continued until 11:30, when Jamal, another barista, tapped Malik's shoulder. "Your lunch break, man. Take it before Derek gives it to someone else." Malik nodded gratefully, untying his apron and heading to the back to retrieve his meal, a simple sandwich and an apple he'd prepared the night before. He grabbed his jacket, planning to eat at the small park across the street rather than in the cramped break room where Derek often found urgent tasks that cut into precious rest time. As he stepped outside, the midday sun offered light but little warmth. Chicago's temperature had dropped further, and pedestrians hurried past with hunched shoulders and buried chins. Malik was about to cross the street when something caught his attention, a small figure sitting alone at one of the cafe's outdoor tables. It was an elderly woman, perhaps in her 70s, wearing a thin cardigan that provided almost no protection against the biting cold. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and wire-framed glasses sat on a face lined with age but striking in its dignified structure. Her hands, spotted with age marks, were wrapped around an empty paper cup as if trying to extract warmth that had long since dissipated. She was shivering. Through the cafe window, Malik could see his co-workers glancing occasionally at the woman before returning to their tasks. One server shrugged at another, the universal gesture of, "Not my problem." Malik hesitated only for a moment before changing direction. He approached the woman slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, ma'am? Are you all right?" The woman looked up, her eyes a startling clear blue against her pale complexion. "Just resting a moment," she replied, her voice soft but carrying an unexpected note of authority despite her fragile appearance. "It's pretty cold to be sitting outside without a proper coat," Malik observed gently. Without further deliberation, he slipped off his navy wool jacket, his only decent winter coat, purchased after 3 months of saving, and carefully draped it around her thin shoulders. The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Young man, I couldn't possibly." "Please, I insist." Malik smiled warmly. "I run hot anyway, and I'll be back inside soon. Would you like something warm to drink? On me?" She studied his face for a long moment before nodding almost imperceptibly. "That's very kind. Tea would be lovely, if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all. Any preference?" "We have quite a selection. Earl Grey, if you have it." "Just plain." "One Earl Grey coming right up. And please keep the jacket as long as you need it." Malik hurried back inside, heading straight to the counter where Jamal was working on a customer's order. "Hey, can I get an Earl Grey for the elderly lady outside?" "I'll pay." Jamal glanced out the window, then back at Malik with a raised eyebrow. "Dude, you gave her your jacket? That's your good one." Malik shrugged. "She was freezing. Your lunch break's already half gone, and now you're spending it on some random old lady?" This came from Derek, who had materialized beside them with his usual impeccable timing for catching non-productive moments. "Just trying to help someone out," Malik replied, keeping his tone neutral as he handed over his credit card to pay for the tea. Derek's mouth tightened. "Well, when you're done playing Good Samaritan, the bathroom needs checking. Someone spilled coffee all over the floor." Malik nodded, accepting the steaming cup of tea from Jamal. As he headed back outside, he heard Derek mutter something about wasting time when we're already overstaffed. The woman was exactly where he'd left her, his navy jacket enveloping her small frame like a blanket. She looked up as he approached. "Your Earl Grey, ma'am," he said, placing it carefully on the table before her. "Nice and hot." "Thank you." She paused, eyes finding his name tag. "Malik," he supplied with a smile. "Malik Johnson." "Thank you, Malik Johnson," she repeated, her hands curling gratefully around the warm cup. "You're very kind in a world that often isn't." Noticing her slight wince as she shifted position, Malik asked, "Are your feet cold? Let me grab you a chair to prop them up on." Before she could protest, he had retrieved an empty chair from a nearby table and placed it in front of her. "This might help with circulation," he explained. "My grandmother always says cold feet make for a cold heart, but I don't think that applies to you." A smile flickered across her face, brief but genuine. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "The wisest," Malik agreed, glancing at his watch. "I should get back to work, but please take your time with the tea. And the jacket, keep it as long as you need. I'll be inside if you need anything else." As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "Mr. Johnson." He looked back. "People reveal themselves in small moments when they think no one is watching," she said cryptically. "Today, someone was." With a slightly puzzled smile, Malik nodded and headed back inside, unaware of how true her words would prove to be, or that the quiet eyes watching his simple act of kindness belonged to someone who had the power to change the course of his life entirely. Back inside Brucor, Malik made his way directly to the bathroom, mop in hand. So much for his lunch break. The sandwich he'd carefully prepared would have to wait until after the afternoon rush. As he cleaned the spilled coffee, his thoughts drifted to the elderly woman outside. There was something about her, A certain dignity in her posture, a sharpness in her gaze that suggested she hadn't always been someone sitting alone in the cold. From her vantage point at the outdoor table, Eleanor Haynes took another small sip of Earl Grey and observed the cafe through the large front windows. She watched as Malik emerged from the back room with cleaning supplies, his lunch break clearly sacrificed to some menial task. She noted how he still managed a genuine smile for customers as he worked, despite the supervisor, Derek, according to his name tag, hovering with crossed arms and a perpetual frown. Eleanor shifted slightly, pulling Malik's jacket closer around her shoulders. It smelled of simple laundry detergent and faintly of cinnamon. The wool was worn at the elbows but well maintained, the garment of someone who took care of what little they had. What young Malik Johnson didn't know, what none of the Brucor employees knew, was that they were all under evaluation. As the reclusive CEO of Quantum Coffee Enterprise, Eleanor had made it her personal mission to visit each newly acquired location incognito. Corporate reports and profit margins told only half the story. Culture was something you had to feel for yourself. 2 tables away, a young woman briefly looked up from her laptop, catching Eleanor's eye before quickly looking away. Eleanor recognized her, Alicia Chin, Quantum's VP of Human Resources, disguised today in casual clothes and thick-framed glasses instead of her usual tailored suits. She gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the cafe, silently confirming what Eleanor was witnessing. Inside, the supervisor's voice carried through the partially open door. "Johnson, when you're done with that, I need you to restock the display case. Tiana's leaving early for a doctor's appointment." "Sure thing, Derek. I'm almost finished here," came Malik's voice, without a hint of the resentment most would feel at having additional tasks piled onto an already shortened break. A tall businessman in an expensive overcoat approached Eleanor's table, stopping to observe her with undisguised curiosity. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice carrying that particular cadence of someone who considers themselves important. "Do you need assistance?" Eleanor offered a fragile smile. "I'm perfectly fine, thank you. That kind young man inside has already helped me." The businessman glanced toward the cafe. "The black barista? Well, good to see some customer service hasn't gone completely downhill." With that tepid observation, he continued on his way. Eleanor's lips thinned slightly. Another data point collected. From her purse, she discreetly removed a small notepad, jotting something down with a silver pen before returning both to her bag. Then, almost as an afterthought, she reached for her phone and tapped a short message to someone. Inside, Malik had finished cleaning and moved to the counter just as a small group of college students entered, laughing loudly and bringing a burst of cold air with them. One of them, a young woman with brightly colored hair, spotted Eleanor through the window. "That poor old lady's been sitting out there forever," she commented to her friends. "Should we invite her in?" "Nah, she's probably waiting for someone," replied her companion with a shrug. "Besides, she's got that guy's jacket now." Malik overheard as he prepared their orders. "She's welcome to stay as long as she needs," he said. "The jacket's the least I could do." Derek, passing behind Malik, snorted. "Yeah, and now you'll be freezing on your way home because you gave away your coat. Real smart, Johnson." The college students exchanged uncomfortable glances at Derek's comment. "Better cold for one night than leaving someone who needs help," Malik responded quietly, handing over their drinks with his characteristic smile. Outside, Eleanor watched this exchange through the window. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth as she made another note in her pad. A sleek black camera disguised as a brooch on her cardigan captured everything: the supervisor's dismissive attitude, Malik's unwavering kindness, the reactions of customers witnessing both. As the afternoon wore on, the temperature dropped further. Malik periodically glanced outside to check on the elderly woman, offering her a refill on her tea during a brief lull in customers. Each time, she thanked him with that same measured dignity, neither overly familiar nor coldly distant. At 4:30, Malik noticed she was preparing to leave. He hurried outside just as she was rising stiffly from her chair. "Ma'am, please keep the jacket," he insisted when she began to remove it. "The temperature's dropping, And I've got another one at home. This was a lie. His only other jacket was a thin windbreaker with a broken zipper, but the thought of her walking away unprotected against the Chicago wind was unacceptable. "You're very kind, Mr. Johnson," she said, studying his face as if memorizing it. "But I cannot take your only proper coat. However, I would like to return it to you properly cleaned. Perhaps tomorrow?" Before Malik could protest further, she had slipped a small card into his hand. "My hotel is just a few blocks away. Have your jacket delivered there tomorrow." With that, she removed the jacket and handed it back, revealing a small rectangular object that had been hidden beneath it on the table. A miniature camera that had recorded everything that transpired at the cafe's entrance for the past 4 hours. As Eleanor Haynes walked away, her posture subtly straightened, her pace becoming more purposeful. The frail elderly woman seemed to transform with each step, leaving Malik staring after her with the business card in his hand and an inexplicable feeling that something significant had just occurred. The presidential suite at the lakefront hotel glowed with the warm amber light of table lamps, contrasting with the Chicago night that pressed against floor-to-ceiling windows. Eleanor Haynes stood silhouetted against the cityscape, having shed her homeless elderly woman disguise. Her gray hair, actually a wig, lay discarded on the marble countertop alongside theatrical makeup wipes stained with the remnants of artificial age spots and wrinkles. In the mirror's reflection, a different woman appeared, still in her 60s, but with sharp features that spoke of authority, sleek silver blonde hair in an elegant bob, and the unmistakable bearing of someone who controlled rooms merely by entering them. Eleanor moved to the suite's dining table where a black leather binder lay open. The label on its spine read, "Brucor's Chicago Personnel Assessment." Inside, neatly organized profiles of every cafe employee filled the pages, complete with performance metrics, personal background information, and professional photographs. She flipped through until she found the page she sought. Malik Johnson's earnest face looked back at her from his employee headshot. His statistics were good but not extraordinary, customer satisfaction metrics slightly above average, efficiency scores within expected parameters. Nothing in the numbers alone would have flagged him for special attention. "Numbers tell such limited stories," Eleanor murmured, reaching for a crystal tumbler of amber liquid. A light knock at the door interrupted her contemplation. "Come in, Alicia." Alicia Chin entered, transformed from the casual observer at the cafe into the polished VP of Human Resources. She carried her own leather portfolio and a tablet. "I've transferred the footage from today's observation," Alicia said, setting the tablet on the table. "Your brooch camera caught some interesting interactions that the fixed cameras missed." Eleanor nodded. "What was your assessment of operations?" "Technically proficient but culturally concerning," Alicia replied, opening her portfolio. "The location meets profit metrics but staff turnover is 23% higher than our company average. Exit interviews cite toxic management as a primary factor." "Derek Walsh," Eleanor stated rather than asked. "Yes. Promoted to supervisor 8 months ago after the previous manager left. He was the most senior employee, but..." Alicia hesitated. "But clearly unsuited for leadership," Eleanor finished. "I witnessed enough today to confirm that." She turned Malik's profile toward Alicia. "Tell me more about this young man." Alicia pulled out her notes. "Malik Johnson, 28. Bachelor's in Business Administration from Illinois State. Applied for our management training program twice, denied both times. Supports his grandmother in assisted living. Perfect attendance record. And denied for management training because..." Alicia checked her notes. "First application lacked a supervisor recommendation. Second time, Derek wrote that Johnson was too soft for management and wastes time on customer relations instead of focusing on efficiency." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "I see." She reached for a pen and made a note in the margins of Malik's file. "Potential leadership priority consideration." Then she flipped to Derek Walsh's profile and wrote something much longer. "What did you make of his interaction with me today?" Eleanor asked. "Genuine," Alicia answered without hesitation. "I monitored him after you left. He seemed troubled that you might be without warm clothing. He asked another employee if they had ever seen you in the neighborhood before, wondering if you were homeless. Eleanor smiled slightly. And his jacket? The one he insisted I keep? I overheard him telling another barista it was his only winter coat. He was planning to layer hoodies until payday next week to stay warm. Eleanor tapped her pen against the table, her expression thoughtful. In 15 years of conducting these incognito evaluations, Alicia, I've learned to recognize authentic leadership. It isn't found in efficiency metrics or upselling percentages. She turned to the front of the binder where a single sheet titled, Restructuring Recommendations, waited. 2 columns listed employee names, retain/promote, and reassign/terminate. Real leadership, Eleanor continued, reveals itself in moments of choice when no one is watching and there's nothing to be gained. I've built Quantum Coffee on the principle that kindness and business success aren't mutually exclusive. She began writing names in each column, her pen moving decisively. Our acquisitions team evaluates profit potential. I evaluate people potential. She looked up at Alicia. We didn't purchase Brewcore merely for its locations or market share. We acquired it for talent that might be hidden under poor management. When she finished writing, Malik Johnson's name topped the retain/promote column, while Derek Walsh's headed reassign/terminate. I've made my decision, Eleanor announced, closing the binder. Schedule the staff meeting for next Thursday at 2 p.m. I'll make the announcements personally. Alicia looked surprised. You usually delegate these to regional directors. This one is different, Eleanor replied, her gaze returning to the city lights. Some lessons need to be delivered in person. She picked up her phone and tapped out a message. A moment later, Alicia's phone chimed. I've just sent you the specifications for our Emerging Leaders Fellowship, Eleanor said. Prepare the necessary paperwork to fast-track Mr. Johnson into the program, pending his acceptance. That's our most competitive leadership track. Alicia noted, eyebrows raised. The waiting list is 6 months long. Consider this a CEO prerogative, Eleanor replied with a hint of a smile. I've been doing this long enough to recognize diamonds amid the coal. Kindness like his can't be taught in training seminars, but leadership skills can be taught to those who already possess kindness. She pulled a business card from her pocket, identical to the one she had given Malik. Tomorrow, when he inquires about returning my jacket, your assistant will accept it and provide him with a receipt. Make sure that receipt includes the time and location of next week's staff meeting. Eleanor walked to the closest where a garment bag hung, unzipping it to reveal several identical cardigans to the one she had worn in her disguise. One final thing, she added, almost as an afterthought. Have accounting process a bonus for Mr. Johnson, quietly for now. The amount should cover the cost of a new winter coat, plus enough to upgrade his grandmother's care package for the next 3 months. Alicia tilted her head. How did you know about? I make it my business to understand what drives exceptional people, Eleanor interrupted gently. Metrics tell us what employees do, Alicia. I want to know why they do it. As Alicia gathered her materials to leave, Eleanor turned back to the window, her reflection now barely visible against the darkness beyond. Next week, she murmured, we'll see if Mr. Johnson is ready to discover what happens when kindness meets opportunity. The following Thursday arrived with Chicago's first real snowfall of the season. Thick flakes swirled outside Brewcore Café's windows as employees gathered nervously in the back room at 2 p.m. sharp. The cafe had been unexpectedly closed for the afternoon, something that had never happened before, with a simple sign on the door reading, "Closed for staff meeting." Malik stood at the back of the room, anxiety churning in his stomach. The rumors had intensified over the past week. Downsizing was coming, positions would be eliminated, the corporate hatchet was about to fall. He'd spent the previous evening updating his resume, just in case. The mysterious elderly woman hadn't returned, but when Malik had delivered his jacket to the hotel address on her card, the front desk had given him an envelope containing a receipt and instructions to attend today's meeting. Curiously, An unexpected bonus had appeared in his last paycheck, enough to purchase a new winter coat and upgrade his grandmother's care package at Lakeside Assisted Living. He'd assumed it was a company-wide bonus, but when he mentioned it to Jamal, his co-worker had seemed confused. "Everyone here?" Derek's voice cut through the murmurs, unusually subdued. The supervisor looked pale, his typical swagger replaced by a nervous energy. "Corporate representatives will be here any minute. I expect everyone to be professional and," he hesitated, "cooperative with whatever changes are announced." The back door opened, and several people in business attire entered. Malik recognized Alicia Chen from the receipt she'd signed when he'd delivered his jacket. Behind her followed 3 men in expensive suits, their expressions unreadable. "Thank you all for gathering today," Alicia began. "As you know, Quantum Coffee Enterprise acquired Brewcore 3 months ago. After a thorough evaluation period, we're implementing strategic changes across all locations." A collective intake of breath filled the room. "Before we proceed, I'd like to introduce someone." Alicia gestured toward the door. "Please welcome the CEO of Quantum Coffee Enterprise, Ms. Eleanor Haynes." A woman entered the room, and Malik felt his heart skip a beat. Though elegantly dressed in a tailored charcoal suit with not a hair out of place in her silver bob, he instantly recognized the elderly woman he'd given his jacket to. The same piercing blue eyes, the same dignified bearing, though now without the stooped posture and theatrical aging. Murmurs rippled through the staff as Eleanor took center stage. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice much stronger and more commanding than the fragile tone she'd used with Malik. "I imagine many of you are wondering why the CEO of a multinational corporation would personally attend a staff meeting at a single cafe." Her gaze swept the room, pausing momentarily on Malik before continuing. "At Quantum, we believe that company culture isn't created in boardrooms. It's built in daily interactions, in how we treat each other, and most tellingly, in how we treat those we think have no power to benefit us." Derek shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his collar. "For the past 3 months, I've been conducting anonymous visits to all our newly acquired locations," Eleanor continued. "I've been evaluating not just operational efficiency, but the human element that spreadsheets can't capture." She nodded to Alicia, who distributed sealed envelopes to each employee. "In these envelopes, you'll find personalized information about your future with Quantum Coffee. Some of you will be offered transfers to other locations. Others will find details about retraining opportunities or, in some cases, severance packages." The room grew so quiet that the sound of tearing paper seemed almost violent as nervous hands opened envelopes. "Before you review your individual situations," Eleanor continued, "I want to share one story." She moved toward Malik, who stood frozen in place. "Last week, I sat outside this cafe disguised as an elderly woman in need. I watched as most of you," her gaze swept across the room, "glanced outside, saw someone suffering in the cold, and chose to do nothing." Several employees studied their shoes, unable to meet her eyes. But one person saw a fellow human being in distress and took immediate action. Without hesitation, without expectation of reward, and at personal cost to himself. She stood directly in front of Malik now, her eyes locking with his. "Mr. Johnson gave me his only winter coat and spent his own money to buy me tea. When his supervisor," she didn't need to look at Derek, whose face had turned ashen, "mocked this kindness and assigned him additional work, cutting short his break, he completed those tasks without complaint." Malik's heart hammered in his chest. The mysterious bonus, the receipt, the staff meeting, suddenly everything connected. "This wasn't a random encounter," Eleanor continued, addressing the whole room again. "It was a test of character. One that most of you failed, but that Mr. Johnson passed with flying colors." She turned back to Malik. "I believe you haven't opened your envelope yet." With trembling fingers, Malik tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter on Quantum Coffee Enterprise letterhead. "Would you like to share its contents with your colleagues?" Eleanor asked. Malik scanned the document, his eyes widening. "It's an invitation to join the Emerging Leaders Fellowship, a management fast-track program." His voice faltered. Is this real? Very real, Eleanor confirmed with the hint of a smile. With a substantial salary increase, full benefits, and tuition reimbursement should you wish to pursue further education. She addressed the entire staff again. Quantum Coffee Enterprise was built on the principle that kindness and business success can, and should, coexist. We don't just want skilled baristas. We want compassionate leaders who understand that every interaction matters. Derek's envelope, Malik couldn't help but notice, was considerably thicker than the others, the thickness of Severance paperwork. Empathy is the foundation of true leadership, Eleanor stated firmly. And it cannot be faked when you think no one is watching. She extended her hand to Malik. So, Mr. Johnson, are you ready to bring your natural leadership abilities to a broader stage? The weeks following the dramatic staff meeting passed in a blur for Malik. His first day in the Emerging Leaders Fellowship began with orientation at Quantum Coffee's gleaming headquarters downtown, a far cry from the worn countertops and hissing espresso machines of Café. Still doesn't feel real, Malik confessed to Alicia Chin as she escorted him through the glass-walled executive floor for his first meeting with Eleanor. 2 weeks ago, I was mopping floors and making lattes. Alicia smiled. That's precisely why Ms. Haynes selected you. You understand the frontline experience in a way most executives never will. Inside Eleanor's office, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago's skyline. The CEO rose from behind her desk as they entered. Mr. Johnson. Right on time, a quality I appreciate. After Alicia left, Eleanor gestured to a seating area where a coffee service waited. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of preparing coffee for you this time. Malik smiled at the role reversal. Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Eleanor, please. She poured 2 cups. I've been reviewing your progress reports from your first training sessions. Your instructors are impressed. Malik accepted the coffee gratefully. It's been challenging, but in the best way. There's so much to learn. Technical skills can be taught, Eleanor observed. Character is revealed. That's the philosophy behind my evaluation method. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me, how are you adjusting to the change? Malik considered the question carefully. Honestly? It's overwhelming. The salary increase alone means my grandmother can move to a better facility. I've opened my first savings account. He paused. But there are challenges too. Such as? Some of the other fellows have MBAs from prestigious universities. They grew up in environments where corporate leadership seemed natural, expected even. For me, he hesitated. For you, it's unfamiliar territory, Eleanor finished. Yet in my experience, the most innovative leaders often come from unexpected places. Malik nodded, gaining confidence. I've noticed something in my training sessions. When we discuss customer experience improvements, many suggestions are technically sound but miss the human element. They focus on efficiency metrics rather than actual human interaction. Eleanor's eyes lit with interest. And what would you suggest instead? A bottom-up approach, Malik replied without hesitation. Our frontline staff have direct contact with customers every day. They know what works and what doesn't, but they're rarely asked for input. Eleanor smiled. You're already thinking like a leader, Mr. Johnson. The conversation continued, touching on Malik's background, his ambitions, and his observations about company culture. By the end, Eleanor seemed genuinely pleased. I have a proposition for you, she said as their meeting concluded. Your fellowship typically includes rotating through various corporate departments. I'd like to add a special project. What kind of project? Brewcore Chicago, your former café, will be our pilot location for a culture transformation initiative. I'd like you to lead it. Malik's surprise must have shown on his face. Too soon? Eleanor questioned. No, Malik replied after a moment. Just unexpected. Some of those people were my colleagues 2 weeks ago. Which gives you unique insight, Eleanor pointed out. The staff has experienced significant changes. Derek Walsh has been transferred to our warehouse operations, where his Efficiency-focused approach may be more appropriate. Several others have been reassigned. The cafe needs a fresh direction from someone who understands both its challenges and its potential. Later that week, Malik found himself standing before the remaining staff of Brucourt Café, now wearing a tailored suit instead of a green apron. The nervous faces looking back at him included both familiar colleagues and new hires. "I won't pretend this isn't awkward," Malik began honestly. "2 weeks ago, I was making lattes alongside you. Today, I'm speaking as part of the management team. But that recent experience is exactly why I'm here." He outlined the culture transformation initiative, emphasizing that every staff member would have input. This isn't about imposing corporate policies from above. It's about building something authentic together. Jamal, still a barista but now the senior team member, raised his hand. "No offense, Malik, but how do we know this isn't just corporate talk? We've heard promises before." "Fair question," Malik acknowledged. "Let me show you instead of just telling you." Over the following months, Malik split his time between fellowship training and implementing changes at Brucourt. He instituted weekly feedback sessions where staff could voice concerns directly. He created a mentorship program pairing experienced baristas with new hires. Most significantly, he established a pathway for frontline employees to advance into management, something that had been technically possible but practically impossible under the previous system. The cafe's atmosphere transformed. Customer satisfaction scores rose steadily. Staff turnover dropped to nearly zero. "You've created something remarkable here," Eleanor observed during her monthly check-in, this time conducted openly at the cafe. "These employees trust you." "Because I listen," Malik replied simply. "And because they know I've been where they are." "That's the essence of authentic leadership," Eleanor agreed. "Which brings me to my next question. Are you ready for expansion?" Malik looked surprised. "Expansion?" Eleanor nodded. "Your pilot program has exceeded expectations. I'd like you to implement this model across our Chicago locations, then potentially nationwide." As they discussed the details, a young woman approached their table, a new hire Malik had personally trained. "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson? There's an elderly gentleman outside who seems disoriented. I remembered what you taught us about community care being part of our mission." Malik glanced at Eleanor, who nodded with a smile. "Go. This is exactly what I'm talking about." Outside, Malik found a man in his 80s trying to read a map with shaking hands. Without hesitation, Malik approached him. "Sir, can I help you find your way?" 1 year later, Malik stood at the podium in Quantum Coffee Enterprises' largest training facility. The audience before him comprised nearly 100 new hires from across the country, the first class of the Community First initiative he had developed based on his pilot program. The company's annual report had highlighted the program's success: 32% increase in customer loyalty, 47% decrease in staff turnover, and 18% growth in revenue across transformed locations. But metrics weren't what made Malik proudest. "Welcome to orientation," he began, surveying the diverse faces looking back at him. "Each of you was selected not just for your skills, but for something that can't be taught in training sessions: genuine empathy." As he spoke, Malik unconsciously adjusted the navy wool jacket he wore. It was the same one, his only good jacket from his barista days, now professionally mended and worn as a personal reminder. Eleanor had offered to have it replaced with something more befitting his new executive role, but Malik had declined. "Before we begin today's session, I want to share a story," he continued. 1 year ago, I was a barista making minimum wage plus tips at a cafe much like the ones where many of you will start your journeys. He recounted the story of Eleanor's visit, the jacket, and how a simple act of kindness had changed the trajectory of his life. "But this story isn't really about me," Malik emphasized. "It's about the power of seeing people, truly seeing them, regardless of their appearance or apparent status." He moved from behind the podium, making eye contact with individuals throughout the room. "At Quantum, under Ms. Haynes' leadership, we've rejected the false choice between profitability and humanity. Our business has grown precisely because we've prioritized compassion. My story is just one example of this philosophy in action." He paused, surveying the room. "Look around you. Each person here has a similar story, a moment when they chose kindness when it wasn't required or rewarded. That's why you were selected." At the back of the room, Eleanor Haynes stood quietly, observing with evident satisfaction. Beside her was Jamal, now manager of the original Brucor location, and several other employees who had flourished under Malik's mentorship program. "Today marks the official launch of our nationwide mentorship initiative," Malik announced. "Each of you will be paired with someone from an underrepresented background in business leadership. Your task is to do for them what Ms. Haynes did for me, provide opportunity, guidance, and genuine support." After the orientation concluded, Malik found himself back in his office reviewing applications for the upcoming fellowship cycle. A knock at his door interrupted his concentration. "Got a minute?" Eleanor asked, entering with a young woman beside her. "For you?" "Always." Malik smiled, rising to greet them. "This is Zoe Washington," Eleanor introduced. "Recent graduate, exceptional potential, but every company she's interviewed with has rejected her because she lacks polish and executive presence, which we both know is often code for biases against certain backgrounds." Zoe stood nervously, clearly intimidated by both executives. But Malik immediately noticed her worn but meticulously clean shoes, the carefully mended seam on her only interview suit, and the determined set of her jaw, all reminiscent of his own early struggles. "Their loss is our gain," Malik said warmly, extending his hand to Zoe. "Welcome to Quantum. I think you'll find we evaluate potential differently here." After Eleanor left, Malik gestured for Zoe to sit. "Before we discuss your role, I'm curious, what brought you to Quantum specifically?" Zoe hesitated before answering. "About 6 months ago, I was waiting for a bus in the rain. My umbrella had broken, and I was soaked. A Quantum delivery driver saw me, pulled over, and gave me his company umbrella. When I tried to refuse, he said his manager had emphasized that community care was part of the job." She smiled slightly. "It seemed like the kind of company I wanted to work for." Malik nodded, unsurprised. "Small actions ripple outward in ways we can't predict. That driver was probably part of our Community First program." Later that evening, as Malik packed up to leave, his phone chimed with a calendar notification. Grandmother's 80th birthday celebration. Thanks to his new position, he had been able to move her to the city's best assisted living facility, just 10 minutes from his new apartment. As he slipped on his navy jacket, the same one he had offered to Eleanor that cold day, he caught his reflection in the office window. Sometimes he still expected to see the barista in the green apron, not the executive in tailored slacks. His hand brushed against something in the pocket, an old business card, the one Eleanor had given him when she pretended to be just another person in need. He had kept it as a reminder that appearances are often deceiving, that everyone deserves dignity regardless of their circumstances, and that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as simple choices. On his way out, Malik passed the wall of framed company principles that had been updated under his influence. The first one read, "At Quantum Coffee, we believe true leadership begins with kindness when no one is watching." As he stepped into the Chicago evening, Malik buttoned his jacket against the familiar wind. It was still the same city, the same cold, the same challenges for countless people struggling through their days. But now he had the power to create ripples of change. And it had all begun with a single jacket, offered without expectation, given purely out of humanity. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Board approved your community outreach program unanimously. Implementation begins next month. You've changed this company, Malik." He smiled, typing his reply. "The company changed me first. See you tomorrow." As Malik walked toward the train station, he passed a young woman shivering at the bus stop without adequate winter clothing. Without hesitation, he changed direction. After all, someone was always watching, if not others, then the person in the mirror who had to live with the choices made when kindness was needed. And that, Malik had learned, made all the difference.